Hey, welcome into the Husker 24/7 podcast for basketball, the Husker 24/7 HoopsCast. I'm Mike Shaver, joined by Brian Christopherson here. Brian, we have not had a chance to really dive into Nebraska basketball's big win over Creighton. Happened on Friday night. The Huskers went into Omaha, never trailed, just took it right to their rivals, built a lead early, and then just kind of kept Creighton at bay. Whenever there was a little bit of a run, Nebraska made a run of their own. Whenever Nebraska needed a big basket, it seemed like they were able to rely on one of the veteran players on the roster. Just a strong Nebraska basketball performance and a victory for the Huskers. I know it's been a few days, but walk us through what you remember from that game on Friday.
I remember a team following a game plan to perfection. And that's not really an overstatement because think of how many games Fred Hoiberg has coached, and he said it's maybe the best a team has ever followed a particular plan to give themselves a chance to win. And just the way they executed, it was Nate Lenzer who developed what they wanted to do on defense against Creighton. And a year ago in Lincoln, it was an 89-60 Blue Jays win, and Creighton got it from wherever they wanted it, in the paint or behind the arc. They controlled both spots. And so Nebraska basically went into it saying, we'll give you some shots from the arc. You got to concede something. We are not giving you the paint. And they just completely took Kalkbrenner out of the mix by, it was a combination of guys, whether it was me at first and Andrew Morgan, Burke, switching up, but then how they would collapse around him, kind of sandwich him. And the guards were really good as part of the plan too. Amazing statistic that Kalkbrenner shot the ball one time, and it was a 3-pointer. That's like unbelievable.
Yeah. The best part about that was all of the John Hole had more field goals than Ryan
Yeah.
Kalkbrenner. Like Nebraska's point totals for football and versus it was people really, really enjoyed how that thing went.
Luke Fickell had as many 2-point conversions when the card didn't show to go for two, as Ryan Kalkbrenner had. Yeah, that's all that stuff.
I can't believe we did multiple podcasts this week, and I never got to go on my rant about whatever Luke Fickell was doing with the 2-point conversion. And then there was someone who was trying to argue against it on Twitter, like, "Oh no, it makes way more sense. You want to be at 12 points and not 13 points." And it's like, all right, I can't do this. I can't do this at all. Anyways, nobody wants to hear about Luke Fickell on this podcast. They want more Nebraska basketball talk. Brian, I know that Nebraska puts out a lot of these, and it's kind of the expectation that we all watch all of them. But I'll be honest, I haven't watched every minute of a Chasing 3 episode all of the time. They did, however, Nebraska basketball put out their cinematic recap of that win against Creighton. Did you watch that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one. What I always like is these things make me feel like they're little self-contained Friday Night Lights episodes. Like when they're on the bus and you have the landscape of Nebraska between Omaha and Lincoln, and we made that drive, and there's nothing relatively pretty about it. Yet somehow in this format with a little backing music, it looks like a very nice scenic bus ride as Nebraska heads into Omaha. And I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, it's Friday Night Lights. I can feel that.
Some music playing as the Gretna Outlet Mall is in the distance.
I don't want to say it's as good as Gene Hackman having Ollie get on someone's shoulders to measure the distance between the floor and the basketball hoop, but the speech that Fred Hoiberg gives to that team about why he likes to play on the road, why he always enjoys playing on the road, how you can and then the word just didn't happen to exist in the video. Somehow the word that was used was edited out. We'll never know what he said, but you can shut those people up. I loved it. It's nice to see Nebraska peacocking a little bit. We don't get that a lot for Nebraska basketball. So when they get their chance, I really do enjoy it.
I felt Nebraska went into that game with a little edge. Like Hoiberg,
played like they had an edge.
Yeah, it was kind of said in jest, but Hoiberg had a crack that he normally wouldn't make, I think, about, it's interesting how they'll be cheering for the football team the next day. Like he brought it up. He went to the J Skur route like a couple days before the game, and it was done with a humorous tone, but also like, what's that all about, And then you had Jawan Gary, who we were told this afterwards, they needed someone to emerge as that, like, the DAWG dog, like, it
The
just like,
dog.
yeah, all week they needed that, and someone who understood this rivalry, who has won in that gym before, to be the face of that, and he was. Like, he was the guy, I think, that was really pushing him behind the scenes, and, it helps because it makes guys like Connor Esijan and Burke and these guys kind of understand, like, you don't want to be on the wrong end of this because you're going to hear about it all season if you are. So let's go. And so I think they did a good job with the merging parts, getting them to understand what this game was about. And Nebraska just had a tenacity. They didn't even shoot it that well, really. I don't have the number in front of me, but I think they're like 42%, something like that.
They were 4-16 from 3. I know that.
Yeah, and I was the idiot who, like, before the game, no shock, I was wrong, but I was like, they're averaging 5 makes behind the arc, and I was like, well, they're gonna have to, like, double that to win, they're gonna have to have one of those games, and they didn't. They didn't need it. CU was only like 12 of 42 or something like that. So um, that's how you win, and then holding Kalkbrenner to one shot. But everybody who was on the court did something well and useful. Like, you could tell, even like Braxton Mia, his first 3 minutes, like, he came to the bench at the 17-minute mark. I watched a TV broadcast. He's like gassed. I mean, he had like, but I don't mean it in a bad way. Like, he had given all of that he can for 3 minutes to shut him down, and that was going to be his job, to do it in like little stints here and there, and he did.
Yeah, I was so impressed watching that game as it was unfolding, the effort and the way that those bigs, whether it was Braxton Mia in his 11 minutes or Andrew Morgan or Burke, like the way that they were just fronting Kalkbrenner, how flustered they had Kalkbrenner. They were moving him off of his spots. He was getting annoyed because you could tell there's multiple possessions going on where he's not even getting a touch. And this is a guy that's a candidate, not just as like the Big East Defensive Player of the Year. This is a guy that was like, was it the Naismith Award? Like the player of the year for college basketball. When you think about every college basketball season, there's always someone that takes home that award that usually is an alpha, that is just a phenomenal player. You go throughout history, and there's great players have won that. Kalkbrenner is up for that award, and you held him to just making free throws was the only way that he scored. He never even got a 2-point attempt off, because you never let him get far enough inside the paint, or if he did, he got fouled. And so then it wasn't an official statistic. I mean, it's just a really strong defensive effort. And I thought encapsulated, and again, it's on that cinematic video, they're trying to get him the ball, and they're just like, all right, we're going to lob it over Braxton Mia. And he's just like, no, you're not. And he's able to just reach back there and just one hand pulls that ball in and just ends a possession with a steal. I don't know what the exact numbers was. I think it was 12 steals, but Nebraska had a bunch of steals up and down that lineup. It wasn't like it was one guy had like 6. A lot of people contributed in that game in a really positive way. And we've talked about it, Brian. It seems like Fred Hoiberg really likes this team because he's getting a version of it at practice that we haven't yet see really play out on the court. Probably got the closest to it as we have. They played well in spurts in Sioux Falls. They played a great 40 minutes against Creighton. And I understand Creighton, we'll see what they are at the end of the year. When they get Stephen Ashworth back, they're going to be a better team than they are right now. But that was a big win. And I think it just tells people like, hey, stick with this team. It's been ugly, but there's something happening here.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned CU. They're going to struggle for a little bit here with the Ashworth injury.
Brutal schedule.
Yeah, they lost to San Diego State the other day, and they play Kansas upcoming. So they might dip below 500. I think they'll get it back, and they'll be a solid team. Nebraska needs them to be. I mean, you want them to be top 75 at least. That's what it requires to stay a quad 1 win. They've definitely got some things to work on, though. They're a work in progress over there too. But yeah, and Nebraska only turned it over 7 times. That was really impressive. And I liked, late in the game when you get a little edgy and you're like, oh man, Creighton's got it to like within 8 or so. Raleigh Wooster had 2 possessions that were bad where he turned it over, and it was kind of a rare moment for Nebraska in that game. But it's the advantage of having a guy who's played a ton of college hoops that he just didn't seem phased by it. He hits that jumper one-on-one, mid-range jumper that sort of like, to me, sealed it. And then he got a breakaway where he scored. So he had 4 straight points. So that's good to see. And the other big takeaway to me was a Sejan and just how hard he worked without the ball. Not just to get threes, but we saw him get to the free throw line, get 2-point attempts. And that was what Casey was really good at. Not just setting himself up for threes, but Casey would go steal like 6 points some games just by back cuts and stuff like that. And I think you saw where the potential is for Connor Essegian to be more than just that guy who's hovering around the arc. He can be a real action guy. They had added some stuff for him, and he ended up with 15 points. And I thought the performances by Essegian and Burke against St. Mary's and Creighton are probably the biggest things that have elevated my faith. Like, okay, I can see how parts can come together. I liked how both those guys looked in the course of 2 tougher games.
What I loved about Connor is that he banks in that 3, and they're just chasing him off the 3-point line. Like, they're just not going to let him find space out there and just bomb it away. And so he's like, all right, I'll just step inside, and you're not going to cover this 18-footer. Boom, there's 2 points. Like, I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about. It's not just forcing action that isn't there. It's all right, so this didn't work for me. What can I do? How can we still score? You're not going to cover this? Just having that ability. I mean, Bryce, we've seen him. Bryce Williams has that where he can come in and hit an 18-foot jump shot. Like, that's a dead part of basketball right now. It's all 3 points and playing at the rim for the most part. But if you have those guys that can hit some of those shots, getting 2 points on a possession is always a great thing. And so, if Nebraska has to do it a little bit differently, if the outside shots aren't falling, but they can hit some of these mid-range shots and keep adding, and then eventually continue to attack and work and get to the free throw line, like being an all levels scorer or being, as a team that you have the ability to score at all the levels, that's a really valuable thing. And I thought that was a sign of a mature player that, okay, I'm not going to get the 3-pointers, but I can still attack them here. And I can still get to the hoop if I need to. And they're going to foul me, so I'm getting to the free throw line. You love to see that. And I thought Connor Essegian, you mentioned, I mean, I think it really represented a mature, smart, heady basketball player to not just force a bunch of bad looks, but find something that's going to work and help your team out.
Yeah. Final thought from me on it. It was last year's team was so enjoyable. They were just a fun group, and Casey was part of that. But Josiah and like sort of his story and all that, Rink, jumping on the scene. It was just a fun group to root for, and we saw this fan base really fall for that team all the way to Memphis, where there's a ton of fans. And I do think this current team needed a game like Friday to sort of push the conversation forward with the fans. Not that they're not trying to figure out the new guys and stuff like that. They are, but you need a performance like that where those guys this group together with different faces goes and gets it done against a team like Creighton, a rivalry game. And it kind of, I think, pushes it forward now for fans. It's like, okay, I see what different guys on this team can do, and it's time to start talking about this group and not always comparing it. I'm still doing it with some of the Casey stuff, but that's I think important for this squad is to set their own standard of who they are and their own definition of what they are as a team. And there are going to be some things they do better and worse than last year, but they showed that they can be a good squad. You just got to keep building on what they did now.
Yeah, and I think to me the best part about games like Friday is that now you can do it. Like Nebraska is going to have to take on a whole litany of good Big Ten basketball teams, and they're going to be able to draw on the fact that they went into an environment that wasn't favorable. There weren't. I mean, you were in the arena. I was too. There was a smattering of Nebraska fans.
A lot. Yeah.
That wasn't. That was a lot of blue in that building. And they went in and they shut those guys up. And so you can play in a tough environment. You can go against a team that has expectations, that expects to win. You can play when everything doesn't. It's also important for this too. You can play and win when everything doesn't go perfect. They played great defensively. They played okay on offense. What happens if they play good on defense and they play good on offense? They're going to be a team that can win some Big Ten games, but they have to figure out their formula and they have to figure out the guys that are going to be able to kind of consistently do it in and out. But I think they showed us that they have the ability to go play with teams. And so, right now you get South Dakota and North Florida coming up. But after that, Brian, it's right there with Michigan State for December 7th. You got your first Big Ten game. You're on the road in I don't even know what that building is, but then you turn around, you got Indiana at home, and that's a ranked Indiana team that you kicked their ass multiple times last year. If you don't think Indiana wants to bring it to Nebraska and give it to them, you're crazy. And they're going to have to be ready to play that game. And I feel so much better about who this team is after that 1-2 punch of St. Mary's and Creighton than I certainly did before.
Yeah. And we're taping this on Wednesday, right before the South Dakota game. And first things first, I mean, you gotta handle these games. Like the thing that you don't want to have happen is have a contest here in the next 5 days, which is on your TV graphic in February. As one of the bad losses. And we were talking off air before this. South Dakota's 5-2. First off, and some of those teams, Andrew Morgan can probably attest to it, to the guys in the locker room. They can go off on a given night and have you in a tight game. And then North Florida, let's see, they have wins already over South Carolina. They beat by 3. Georgia Tech, they beat by 12 on the road. They lost to Georgia by 13. But, I mean, so they beat in 2 power conference teams, and that's the game Sunday. So Nebraska's got to be ready, because these are not just like walkover games. And then, as you say, then it's the stretch of 2 Big Ten games with Michigan State, Indiana, where get a split at least, sort of like they did with St. Mary's Creighton. If you did that, if you win 3 of the next 4, then you're going to Hawaii feeling pretty good about things.
Well, and if we need to kind of put a little fear into people here, it's not just what was a year ago. Nebraska had a North Dakota team that basically in the first half was giving them absolute fits. And you didn't necessarily feel like Nebraska was going to lose that game, but it was also one of those like, all right, it's time to turn this on. It's time to turn this on. It's time to turn this on. And they eventually won that game. They may even have won by double digits, but you never know what version of a team is going to come into Pinnacle Bank Arena. And that was a Nebraska basketball team that a couple of weeks later would go on to beat Purdue, the number 1 team in the country. Yeah. And they were struggling with North Dakota for the first 20 minutes of basketball, straight up struggling in that game.
Yeah. They were kind of fortunate to get out of that one. That was a game, I believe, right before the holiday break. A little different because guys
were – there's a Christmas break.
Yeah, so guys are actually probably going home, and this is Thanksgiving where guys will stick around here.
Was it the first game after that Kansas State, kind of just a really physical –
I think so, yeah.
And so it was I just remember okay, if that Nebraska basketball team can play down to its opponent, this one certainly can. So you're absolutely right. This game against South Dakota here on Wednesday and North Florida on Sunday, you got to show up with the same kind of intensity. You put that on paper, you put it on film. People now have expectations. Now, how do you play with that? It's always a fun part about teams like this. All right, what does it look like when no one thinks anything of you? What does it look like in a key game? Now, what does it look like when you've created expectations for yourself and everyone else?
They need to do it for us, because if someone doesn't listen to this till Thursday morning and somehow Nebraska loses to South Dakota and we spent the first 15 minutes lauding them about their win over Creighton, not going to look good for us. So the Huskers need to handle business just for us. Let's be selfish about it.
Do something for Husker247. That Friday win against Creighton wasn't enough. We need more. No, so Nebraska plays here. We're recording this on a Wednesday. They're playing tonight. They'll play again on Sunday against North Florida. We will not be doing Guess a Random Husker Hooper. We're up against it today, so just a real quick 20-minute podcast for us here. Brian, I want you to give one thing that you're thankful for as it relates to Nebraska basketball throughout the years.
I'm thankful for when you consider the long stretches of mediocre or bad basketball the Huskers have had. I really feel like people in this fan base have stuck with this team and fill PBA. I mean, there's reason to now, But even in some of the bleak years, it would be a nice crowd that a lot of schools would, die to have when you're getting like 9-10,000 for a December or January game and you've been struggling. So I'm thankful for that there's, despite the fact that they've never had that breakthrough and won an NCAA tournament game, there's still that passion for it, and people still listen to things like this. And there's just a collection of diehards that just want to see it happen. And maybe this is the team to do it. So let's hope so, because that'd be a fun ride. I enjoyed last year a lot. This year's team gave us something Friday that makes us think, okay, let's do it again. But I'm thankful for the fans and how much they have stayed in it, even when it always hasn't been easy to.
Yeah, perfectly said. I mean, there is no fan base where it makes it a little bit harder for you to fully invest in the way Nebraska basketball has treated its fans for eternity.
100 years, yeah.
Yeah. But it's a unique experience out there, and we're fortunate so many people care. That's why we have a podcast that's specifically dedicated to basketball. That's why when it's not out on a Tuesday, I'll get texts from people like, hey, you guys doing a basketball podcast this week? So
Yeah,
yes,
that's good.
we are. We're going to try to get back to our usual Tuesday scheduling after the holidays here, but hopefully we'll be discussing how things went for Nebraska against South Dakota and North Florida when we're with you next week. We want to wish everybody happy holidays from Husker 24/7. Enjoy that turkey, enjoy that ham, enjoy the stuffing and the sides. Great sides day on Thursday. That's the real MVP for Thanksgiving are the sides. It's the green bean casserole, the mac and cheese, the mashed potatoes, the turkey, the ham. You can have the debates if you want, but the sides are what bring you to the Thanksgiving table. All right. Well, for Brian Christopherson and Mike Shaver, we will catch you next time for another Husker 24/7 HoopsCast.